Morning all. Thank you for being here. As we did ahead of the summer season, Brad and I are holding another press conference to provide an update on grid operations, reliability, and actions here at the Commission. At both ERCOT and the PUC, we are operating at lightning speed to improve operations, enhance our grid, and ensure reliability for this winter. For the first time ever, we have gotten improved checks and balances to ensure a higher level of reliability than we've ever had. As we did this summer, we will continue to operate with a margin of safety and enhanced reserves, in addition to having reserves available to call in response to real-time conditions. In addition, we'll continue to operate with an abundance of caution, as we did this summer. In addition, we've made a number of changes that will both protect consumers and enhance reliability. Recently, the Commission reduced the highest price that can possibly be charged in ERCOT from the infamous $9,000 a megawatt hour to $5,000 a megawatt hour. Starting January 1st, those extraordinarily high prices can never be charged again. In addition, we have already taken the action to move our largest demand response electricity conservation program to earlier stages of our emergency conditions. The bottom line being that for the first time ever, we're going to use every possible electron before we start asking Texans to turn down their homes and businesses. We've got more generators in ERCOT than we've ever had before. And importantly, in conjunction with the Railroad Commission, we've passed a rule that designates critical natural gas infrastructure so that we know we will have the most important natural gas facilities across the entire natural gas supply chain flowing gas this winter. This is an unprecedented coordination between both the Public Utility Commission and the Railroad Commission, and never before achieved cooperation between the natural gas industries and the power generation industries. Most importantly, for the first time ever, we are requiring winterization of power plants in Texas. This rule was passed over a month ago, and it will require power plants to have been winterized by December 1st, attest to ERCOT that they are winterized, and above and beyond that, ERCOT will be conducting inspections to confirm that our power plant fleet is winterized for this winter. ERCOT will be starting those inspections soon, and I'll let Brad address that process.
Good, thank you. In fact, those weatherization inspections have already begun. On December 1st, we received attestations from CEOs of generators and transmission service providers throughout the industry, throughout Texas, that attested to us that they were prepared for the winter. We began on December 2nd with those inspections. During this inspection cycle, between the December 2nd and December 29th, we intend to inspect over 300 generating units and some 50, or rather I should say 21 transmission providers. In those inspections, we will have them completed, as I said, by the 29th. Those inspections will comprise 85% of the lost megawatt hours during the storm. We are currently in the middle, as I said, of the process. We have inspected over 55 generator units to date. We have also inspected 2 of the transmission service providers. Chairman?
In addition to all of these efforts, we are increasing penalties for violations of those winterization standards to up to $1 million per day, which is an unprecedented level of penalty. And I will remind folks that that is $1 million per day per incident. We're grateful for the generators who have been proactive in preparing their power plants for this winter, which is the majority of our fleet. Those who have not been proactive will be penalized swiftly and heavily. As a combination of all of these efforts, the ERCOT grid is stronger and more reliable than ever. We go into this winter knowing that because of all these efforts, the lights will stay on. No other power grid has made as remarkable changes in such an incredibly short amount of time as we have. And we will continue to improve our grid and our market. The Commission is in the midst of substantial long-term market improvements to ERCOT. In conjunction with the Railroad Commission, we will continue mapping more granularly the natural gas critical infrastructure across the state. And importantly, in conjunction with TDM and under the leadership of Chief Kidd, the Texas Energy Reliability Council is up and running to enhance communication and planning between state agencies, the electric industry, and the natural gas industry. And for the first time ever, in the event of an emergency, representatives from ERCOT, the PUC, the Railroad Commission, Texas Department of Transportation, and TCEQ will be shoulder to shoulder in our State Operations Center to ensure that those agencies and those industries have a central point of communication to provide the best possible services to Texans. That has never happened before, and as you can imagine, is a dramatic improvement in our emergency response and management capabilities. Texans should know that they have the best grid that this state has ever had going into this winter. They deserve to keep their lights on, and we will continue working to ensure that happens. Happy to take some questions.
Chairman,
Rudy.
A lot of critics up to the point of this new rule with the natural gas liken the situation of having a brand new, beautiful, heavy-duty pickup truck with no gas in it or no diesel in it to make it go. Are we going to be able to start this engine?
Absolutely. The new rule from the Railroad Commission removes any opt-out ability for the most large volume, important pieces of natural gas supply chain, from the wellhead to pipelines to processing plants. And those facilities represent over 80% of daily production of natural gas in this state.
I was going to say, from a percentage-wise, worst-case scenario, we have another February. What's protected? Will we have a need for, will that be enough to keep the grid running, or will we have to start doing rolling blackouts under this scenario?
Our power plant fleet doesn't use nearly 80% of daily production on a daily basis. Of course, it goes up and down, but it's nowhere close to 80%.
Today, can you say there will not be a repeat of February?
The lights are going to stay on this winter. We have the combination of all of these efforts. Any one of these efforts would be on its own extraordinary. The combination of all of these reforms, these new rules, these new operating protocols are unprecedented, not only in ERCOT, but any other grid in America.
Brad, in regards to these inspections that have already started, describe to us, A, will you allow media to go along with you on some of these inspections? And two, can you describe what are you doing? What are you looking for?
So the weatherization is a process of determining whether they've put the right equipment in place to protect sensitive equipment or processes within their facilities. We have started a group within ERCOT to show that we have the right emphasis on weatherization. We've appointed an individual who was vice president over grid operations and planning. Now we have started a group called Planning and Weatherization to put the focus on weatherization. And we've hired in to that group about a dozen individuals to perform these inspections and to plan them throughout the year and to set standards in place. Those 12 individuals also have brought in 2 large firms, contracting firms that have specific experience on weatherization of power plants, how it should be done, what are the right processes, and the best practices. So as we go into these power plants, what we'd be looking for is, for example, have they put wind breaks around the right facilities to make sure that a wind chill doesn't cause some problems with equipment? Have they put thermal blankets on the right types of equipment to make sure those thermal blankets keep those facilities warm? Have they appropriately set heat tracing in place so that pipes don't freeze up during cold weather? They'll only be inspecting that type of equipment with the knowledge they have and the experience they have on these facilities. So far, our experience has been good. At each of the facilities, there's been a lot of cooperation by the generating companies. They have been very assistive to us. They've made sure that they've walked through their processes and been able to show us each of the things that we wanted to see. In areas where we have found problems that need to be addressed, they've been very cooperative in quickly addressing those issues. So I feel very good so far about the inspections that have been done, as well as cooperation we've received out of both the generation and the transmission companies.
No red flags, no behavior so far?
No red flags. We have done, as I said, about 55 of the inspections on the generation side to date. Remember, we started on December 2nd, so in that time we've done roughly 55 of those. We've started on December 7th with the transmission companies, and we've done 2 of those transmission companies.
Chairman, you said, and the governor said, that the lights will stay on and that you guarantee it. This goes against the ERCOT report. So where's the disconnect, and is
Which
the ERCOT
report?
false?
Sorry, which ERCOT report?
The latest one that projects this winter preparedness.
Sure, the SARA report, I think is what you're referencing. So there's a big difference between the SARA report and an operational prognosis. The SARA report is a scenario analysis that evaluates a wide range of possibilities. And that is just a simple arithmetic of what kind of discount factor goes here and in what kind of scenario. It does not incorporate all of the extraordinary measures I've outlined today. That's a report that's been part of ERCOT for a long time, and that's something that we will continue to look at to improve the precision and granularity of that report. But it's a scenario analysis, not a prediction tool, and it doesn't incorporate these extraordinary measures.
So you're saying the scenario analysis is false?
It's excellent for scenario analysis. It's not a promise of an outcome. So there are lots of scenarios in there, by example, that show vast reserve of extra power, right? There's some that show there's a scenario where it could be low power and tight grid conditions. It's just like any other scenario. There's multiple possible outcomes. When we look at all of the efforts we've made, the assets we have in ERCOT now, and I mean, it's hard to understate how much reform we have implemented in such a more short amount of time. But when you look at all of that and we look at the realities on the ground in front of us, yes, we can say the lights are going to stay on.
How many generators have submitted their weatherization plans? Do you know how many more are going to, and how are you keeping track of which ones are submitting them and when they're going to, that timeline?
Right.
So those operation plans came in with their attestations, and we received attestations on December the 1st. We expected to receive about 855 attestations. We've received about 97% of those on time. A few were still remaining to be dealt with, but 97% of those generation attestations came on time. Also, these attestations are coming from the CEOs of these companies. We wanted to make sure that we had the highest level executive engaged in actually signing on the dotted line that their generation was ready and prepared for this winter. Of the transmission companies, roughly, I believe, about 54 transmission companies we expected to receive attestations from. We have received 100% of those.
So for the 3% that didn't submit their weatherization plans yet, are you tracking to make sure they're going to turn that in, or?
Yes, we've been discussing those 3% with the PUC.
So just to be, you're saying that so far, only 3%, all but 3% have submitted their weatherization plans.
That is correct.
Chairman, you mentioned that the PUC is working with the Railroad Commission to map out critical natural gas infrastructure, but to my knowledge, the media hasn't gotten any indication of what the weatherization requirements might be for those natural gas facilities. You know, like electricity providers can be weatherized all they want, but if they don't have the fuel that they need, how much does it actually matter? Do you have any knowledge of what the weatherization requirements and deadlines might be on the natural gas side?
So I'll defer the Railroad Commission on their rulemaking processes. I will say two things. The natural gas ecosystem is a vastly larger supply chain and ecosystem than power plants. Power plants are a discrete unit. They're large, very complicated units, but that's a discrete unit in one location. The natural gas system incorporates thousands of miles of pipelines, hundreds of processing plants, compressor stations, and thousands of producing wells, which is why the mapping committee, that's a conjunction of the Railroad Commission and the PUC, is meeting at a minimum monthly. Their subgroups, their working groups are meeting weekly, at least weekly, and they'll be providing a public-facing meeting of that mapping committee early in 2022. And so there will be an update on that in early 2022, and like I said, the most important part of this winter is we know that the biggest swath of the largest producers and conveyors of natural gas are designated critical infrastructure. We're going to keep improving and refining that with the mapping of the natural gas supply chain.
So they're designated as critical, as in, you know, their power is going to be turned off in an emergency, but has the PUC gotten any sort of reassurance from the Railroad Commission that those critical facilities have made any significant winterization efforts? Is that
we know that's in process. We have great communication with all members of the Railroad Commission. I meet with Commissioner Wright weekly, speak with Chairman Christian regularly, as well as Commissioner Craddock. So we've got great communication, and we are assured that's in process. Again, I'll defer to their agency for their specifics of their rulemaking.
Is it safe to say, though, that the PUC is confident that those critical natural gas facilities in an emergency will still be able to supply the necessary natural gas?
Yes, yes. That was a remarkable, again, that's a remarkable combination of work between both the Railroad Commission and the PUC, in addition to the natural gas industry and the electric industry. That's never, ever happened before.
Chairman, I think what we're trying to get to is that a lot of pipelines froze up. Gas couldn't get to these facilities. Are we sure that these lines aren't going to freeze up again? And I guess that may be a question more for Brad, because that was the problem. So, you know, yeah, we won't turn off the power, there'll be critical infrastructure, but still the lines froze up. What's going to keep them from freezing up again? There
were lots of problems, to be clear. That's the key element of the Railroad Commission rule from last month, is that the biggest producers, conveyors of gas will keep the power on, and therefore have the power they need to ensure those that they can operate those facilities. That process is in place and will be implemented this winter. So I mean that covers over 80% of the daily production of gas in Texas. And if you remember, think about it. If you remember, the first problem we had last spring was that one of our transmission companies went from 11 critical natural gas facilities to over 800. So in many ways, that's an overabundance of caution, and we need to have a more fine-tuned designation of what is truly critical, what are the high volumes, so we can keep the most important ones on without overwhelming the system.
We've got time for one more question, y'all.
Speaking of that, Commissioner, you mentioned the transmission projects, and the governor has directed you to essentially direct ERCOT to build out the transmission projects. And these come with companies, they come with high costs, and they take a long time to develop. So what are you doing to get these, one, off the ground, and two, get these done in an expedited fashion?
So lots of things. Commissioner Kovos, one of my colleagues, has done an extraordinary job leading the development of major transmission into the Rio Grande Valley, where we for have a long time have known that there are stranded generating assets that can't get their power to the rest of the state. And so she quite simply took charge and cut through the red tape that had prevented that. And she ought to be commended for that. Commissioner Glodfelty has a vast amount of experience in the power transmission business, and he's taking a lead on transmission process planning at ERCOT. So there'll be improvement on the process side as well. And Commissioner McAdams has taken a lead on improving how we connect generators to the grid. So we're approaching the transmission problem from every angle. Each of my colleagues has done an excellent job taking on those leadership roles. And so, yes, while big transmission projects take a long time to build, it's safe to say we've cut through more red tape and made more progress than we've ever seen at ERCOT before.
Can you put that in a years situation? Like, I mean, are we talking about you've expedited it by years, you've expedited it by months, or do we not know?
Years. When you add up all the different stages have been reduced by different amounts of time, absolutely years. And we're going to continue improving that process at ERCOT. So the next transmission project and the next one can be expedited with the appropriate checks and balances for costs and land use, et cetera, in place. But we're moving forward on the transmission the state needs.
You said the last will,
Thank you.
the last will stay on, but there were also concerns about, there's still concerns about water, which was